time has to come through and welcome us. So I will allow that chance to our national chairperson, Mrs. RISE Mzansi to come through. Just a couple of formalities. There is a register that is circulating. Please make sure that you sign the register. Cell phones, please on silent or vibrate. I do know that you live very busy lives, so that if you're able to or you need to take a call, then you'll be able to step outside and do that. There are latrines, I think, just out the door. You'll find them if you walk down the hall. And we will be serving finger lunch after this engagement. It is scheduled to end at 12:30, so we will be together for about 2.5 hours maximum. Again, please give a huge round of applause to our national chairperson, Mrs. RISE Mzansi, who will give us an overview and tell us why we are convened here today. Thank you.
Thank you, my leader. Sanbanan, good morning. Goeiemorgen. Lovely to see. Did I miss anybody's language? Dumelang, Molweni. Lovely to see you all this morning, and thank you, my leader, for the introduction. My name is Vuyiswa Ramokhupa, in case anybody missed it, and I'm proud to stand here and represent our beloved movement, RISE Mzansi, as the national chairperson. I'm just going to say a few words to give a bit of background about what these discussions are about. We have been hosting these policy gatherings. We've actually had a few now. I think we're on our 5th or our 6th one so far. But the policy gatherings are one of many forms of discussions that we have with different communities and different constituencies all over South Africa. We refer to our politics as listening politics, which is very different from a standing on stages and giving speeches and shouting at people politics. We believe very much that the people are the ones who have the answers, who will be instrumental in building and creating a new vision for South Africa. And our job, our role as RISE Mzansi is to facilitate and enable those conversations to happen. So we create platforms and spaces such as this for engagement. And I'm hoping that you will use this opportunity to engage very openly, candidly, sincerely with us about the type of solutions you would like to see, and whether it pertains to the topic, because today there is a very specific topic around gender-based violence. But of course, gender-based violence is not an isolated issue. It is a broader issue, societal issue. It talks about crime in our communities, crime in our homes, domestic violence. It also touches on issues of economic inequality, poverty, trauma, and the many various social ills that are experienced by South Africans on a daily basis. There are so many dimensions that come out of this conversation, and I met a young gentleman earlier today who talked about the intersection between environment, sustainability, and climate change even, with the women economy, and bringing that back again into the gender conversation and the gender-based violence conversation. So this is a very complex discussion, one that can be very triggering for many, especially those who have been victims of gender-based violence or who have experienced gender-based violence. And so I'm also hoping we can engage with that level of empathy and understanding for the fact that we all come from different circumstances, different backgrounds, different stories. But we all want one thing, I'd like to believe. We all want to build a better South Africa. We want the South Africa that we were promised in 1994. A South Africa where everybody has real freedom, where justice means something, where we can access justice freely and meaningfully, where there is true solidarity. You don't need to be a woman to understand the plight of a woman and to fight for the rights of women. And I'm really excited to see so many men in the room. It's so important that we have these conversations collectively as we build our country. So I don't want to go into the topic because we actually have an incredible keynote speaker today. But I do want to give you just a few highlights in terms of some of the experiences that we have had over the last few months. We had our official launch as RISE Mzansi in April 19th to be exact, 2023. And following that, we launched the RISE Mzansi tour. The RISE Mzansi tour has taken us to all 9 provinces, to various cities, townships. We have walked through informal settlements. We have sat with business leaders, both big business as well as small business. We had actually an amazing business engagement in Soweto just the other day. We have marched with in solidarity with various other movements, and it's taken us actually far and wide in the length and breadth of South Africa. And the most amazing thing are the various conversations that we've had. We are working towards now what we are terming the People's Manifesto. You will know that most political parties at some point produce a document called a manifesto, right? But a manifesto, as many of us know, you will just get a document that has a list of promises and things that people are going to do. And you always ask yourself, where did these things come from, number one? Number two, how do we ever hold people accountable to these things? So, if I'm honest, can I just actually, by show of hands, who actually reads party manifestos? Can I just, hands up? That sounds about right. No, that sounds about right. I think, what is that? Maybe 2-3% of the room puts their hands up. That is actually very accurate. And that is actually the case for most South Africans. Most voters, most South Africans, most citizens don't read manifestos. They see what you do, and they make their decisions based on how you live, your values as an organization. But most importantly, people don't read manifestos because they've had no opportunity to input into those manifestos. So that's somebody's document some way that they've now brought to you to say, here, sign here and put an X here for my manifesto. But RISE has taken a very specific posture and said, we launched on the 19th of April with no manifesto. And we were heavily criticized for that. Heavily. But we were resolute in our view that it is not up to us to sit down and write a document and then go and give it to South Africans. If we are truly going to rescue our country and bring every single South African with us on this journey, we need to have as many people being part of the creation of this manifesto as possible. And we call this document the People's Manifesto. So we have been having conversations in town halls, in meetings, all over the country on various different topics to understand truly what keeps South Africans awake at night. What is it that truly bothers South Africans? And not just bothers, what is it that South Africans truly want to see? What are our dreams and aspirations for ourselves? We've stopped dreaming as a country. All we do is just manage from one crisis to the next. The People's Manifesto gives us an opportunity to reimagine the kind of country, the kind of South Africa that we deserve, and that we now have another opportunity to actually create and rebuild through this organization that is RISE Mzansi. So that is what we are doing, and that's the purpose even of today. Today is about having those discussions. This is a topic, obviously, that is a very big priority for us, but also a very big national priority. My dream is that when we stand here, a generation from now, I have 2 daughters. My youngest is 2 years old. My dream is that when she stands as a 40-year-old woman, gender-based violence will no longer be a topic. We will no longer speak of the scourge of gender-based violence. And I dream of that for my own child. I don't want to raise a girl child in a world where she fears for her life, where the biggest threat to her comes from the person that she loves and that she is supposed to be finding protection from. So I'm waking up, I'm rising today to ensure that we see an end to gender-based violence. And I'm relying on every single one of you to help us figure out how to make that happen. To give us your best thinking, your stories, your ideas. This is not just a cosmetic exercise. This is not a political exercise. We're just having an event. No. This is a very serious process of mining the best minds in society to help us solve the most complex problems that we are facing as a country. We don't believe genuinely that, as we said, we may know many things or we don't know everything. And we accept that. But what we know for sure is that the millions of South Africans that we have had an opportunity to engage with collectively can help us solve the most complex problems. And RISE Mzansi can be a vehicle to make sure that those complex problems and the solutions for those complex problems become a reality and they become implemented. So without too much further ado, I just want to share 2 or 3 quick anecdotes, and then I'll hand over to our keynote speaker. As I've mentioned, we've had an opportunity to have these conversations in many different settings. And what has become very, let me say, striking for me is the similarities that exist in so many different segments of society. That has actually been probably the biggest privilege of this journey, has been to see the fact that although people are so different, whether you are talking to somebody in Manenberg or Soshanguve or Emlazi or Khaleshiwe, our problems actually are largely the same. And in fact, as a people, we have more that unites us than separates us, than divides us. We're actually so similar, and we actually want the same things. We met a young lady in Manenberg. Her name is Angie. Angie lost her parents 2 years ago and lives with her 3 brothers who are all addicted to drugs. Crystal meth, apparently, is what has taken, in fact, many communities. It's gripped many communities. So Angie shared with us that, the last few years of living in this house as the only woman, 3 brothers, none of whom are working, and she has been a victim of gender-based violence inflicted by her own siblings, which was probably one of the most painful stories I've heard, because you would imagine that this thing comes from somewhere else. But it's not. It's here. It's in our homes. And it's exacerbated by alcohol, by drugs, and of course by unemployment, poverty, the trauma of poverty, and the pain that is felt by all of the people that are involved in this ecosystem. In Orange Farm, just 2 months ago, we buried a young lady who had been killed, in fact, as part of an anti-LGBTQI killing. Again, for no good reason other than the fact that she was a young gay woman. She approached another woman. That woman's boyfriend didn't like what he saw and decided to end her life. Buried her in his house and sat on that body for 3 months whilst the police investigation happened. Mind you, the same man was part of the search party that was looking for this woman whilst the police were conducting the search. And many people knew in the community that something wasn't right in this house. But people were afraid to speak up. So it takes me to the other point to say, what is the cost of silence? And what is our role as citizens in being part of the change that we want to see? so many of the things that are wrong in our community, particularly when it comes to issues of domestic violence and gender-based violence, are things that are known to us. The perpetrators are known to us. We live in communities where we hear and see families where we know gender-based violence is being perpetrated. What is our responsibility, and how do we then interact with the criminal justice system or with society as a whole and say no? The third story that I wanted to share, also very much aligned with the first two stories, was shared with me. It was from right here, actually. But again, a lady shared her story yesterday, and I won't give her name. But again, she has experienced gender-based violence by her boyfriend, who again would particularly strike when under the influence of alcohol. So that is also another element we have to address. What is the relationship between alcohol and violence? Remember during COVID when we had lockdown and all the liquor outlets were outlawed, and suddenly the rate of violent crime dropped? We need to have these honest reflections as a society and as communities about the many ways in which we ourselves enable these social ills to occur, and what do we need to do, and how do we stamp out once and for all the scourge of violence, and particularly gender-based violence in our communities. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your inputs. And as I said, I really appeal to everybody in this room to make your inputs candidly, openly, honestly. This is a safe space, but more importantly, be mindful of the fact that this is an opportunity to truly be a co-author of the future that we deserve, the country that we deserve. Many of us were not there when the Constitution was being drafted and when deals were being made about our country. But this presents us with that opportunity to put on paper our real aspirations for this country, and then to fight to make sure that it happens. So I call on all of us when we leave this room today, and we're not leaving yet, it's just the beginning of the day, but think about during the course of the day what you want to rise for. What are we going to do? And I say this because in a lot of these meetings, people say, RISE Mzansi must do this, RISE Mzansi must do that. RISE Mzansi does nothing that the people of RISE Mzansi aren't willing to do. So it is equally all of our responsibilities to ask ourselves the question, what are we willing to do in all of the things that we'd like to see done? Ngiyabonga.
Thank you so much for those. Our national chairperson at RISE Mzansi. Welcome to those who are also watching us on our live streams. Please do leave your comments throughout the engagement today. If we do have time, we will read them out. Our guest speaker that is coming up, when I asked for her bio, was like, I'm going to send you a short paragraph because it's giving obituary. So she didn't want to send an entire thing because she felt as if it was too soon to be read out and defined like that. So Khanyisa Boy is a sexual and reproductive justice activist. Her work has been in leadership development, policy work, and health communications. She founded Eve's Apple the Mag, an intersectional digital health and pleasure focused on education and capturing queer joy. In consolidating all this, she leads Health Communications Africa, recognizing the importance of effective communication in advancing healthcare outcomes across the African continent. A huge round of applause for Khanyisa Boy, our keynote speaker today.
someone, or even you know who you are, will only be at the end. So it's like, if you can introduce me at my funeral, that will be a long one. But this one will be short. It's just to convince you that I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? um, it's quite a tough topic to tackle. Gender-based violence. It's even tougher in a country where we are leading. Um, and I just want to appreciate a movement that from the onset decides to tackle these difficult topics. I look forward to your conversations on health access as well, because these are some of the issues that are burning issues in the country. Um, I will start by saying that please take care of yourselves. I know that the issue of gender-based violence can be very triggering. So if you feel for you, you just need a moment, please do take the moment that you will need. If you have any questions, I would appreciate it if you note them so that you don't lose them. And outside of that, I know that this presentation, this very short presentation, does not cover health access. However, we are in the process of co-creation. So I'm not coming up here because I know everything. We're in the process of co-creation, and I hope that in our conversations, the health aspect of it presents itself. So in the end, unlike most presentations, I'm not coming here with an answer. I don't have it. If I did, maybe there would be a resolve. But in the end, it's an opportunity for us to do the work of finding out what safety looks like for every South African person. I think I'm gonna leave it time for peace, right? So gender-based violence is recognized by the World Health Organization as a major health problem, right? It's responsible for death. It's responsible for injury. It's responsible for loss of income for different households, for different people. A lot of the times, gender-based violence is termed as an issue that is solely directed at women. In fact, gender-based violence is across the board. So if you look at violence itself, you will find that even men, in fact, primarily men, are the most affected by gender-based violence. But because women and queer people are vulnerable groups, then we have taken the stand to own this narrative and the work as well. But I wanted to highlight that this is not just work for women, it's work for men as well, who are, in fact, primarily affected by gender-based violence. Some of the issues that you see when it comes to gender-based violence are health risk, mental health, sexually transmitted diseases. We live in a country that struggles a lot with, I think that's why he gave me this one, that struggles a lot with high numbers of sexual assaults. When it comes to gender-based violence, some of the things that I identified are cultural norms or religious norms, but mostly it is a culture of inequality. And the culture of inequality is world over. We term it patriarchy when there's different levels of society that are recognized as far more important than the others. And as a direct result, whoever is seen to be at the bottom of the food chain is the one that is most oppressed. And in this instance, you're looking at people who are queer, you're looking at women, and you're looking at girls, and also looking at people who are women, girls, and also have disabilities. When it comes to gender-based violence, sometimes we kind of group it together as just this umbrella thing, right? It presents itself in different ways. You have domestic violence, you have intimate partner violence, and we have to be specific and speak about violence against people in the LGBTI community, and also femicide. There's too many moving parts. Can this move? Thank you. There you go. So the realities of gender-based violence in South Africa is that we are very comfortably named the rape capital of the world. All right. We all know or know of someone who has been sexually. Just as before I started, there were stories around how violence takes place in different communities and how it's so similar that each and every one of us has a story. The numbers of queer people who are experiencing violence is not captured. We will go into the policing service in a short while. The rate at which women are killed by intimate partners in this country is 5 times higher than the global average. Gender-based violence is widespread and a common occurrence in South Africa. We see it everywhere on social media. We even take little stances and have our own little narratives of what the possibilities are. And we're always asking for both sides of the story. How you can't say that, what did she do? What did they do? Because a person can't just behave that way. There has to have been an exacerbating factor. So we always have these little stories that we tell and with little stances as well. Just last week, we were doing a values clarification with people who work with the Department of Community Safety. And it was very alarming doing a values clarification with people who are responsible for community safety and realizing that people's stance when it comes to financial abuse, when it comes to physical abuse, changes as soon as the narrative is closer to home. A simple example is of a child, right? Who here has children, right? Who here is willing to admit that they hit children? Right? So what we miss is that that's where the violence starts, right? Where we indoctrinate little people into understanding that love equals violence. And when we don't see a shift in the work that we do, it's because the cycle has continued. Even in relationship and adult relationships, when we speak about what could possibly cause someone to cause harm to someone, there's a myriad of reasons that people tell. And the issue here is that we, as people responsible for safety in that environment, can understand why a person would violate another, right? So even in this room, we need to look at what does it actually mean to change our minds about what violence is, even before we get to the conversation of safety, right? Those kids are not safe in your house, and you love them, and you take care of them. and protection. I think we all understand how well we're great thinkers as a nation. And so you can understand how each pillar supports the possibility of a safer society. But in the work that we're going to be doing today, we need to really plug into which aspect of these pillars we want to work with deeply. Are we cutting across? In the People's Manifesto, in the greater rollout of safety for all of South Africa. This, for me, is a great start towards making a difference when it comes to gender-based violence and femicide. But the work still lies with us to be able to look at where our work, so if you know that, for example, mine is accountability and prevention. I know pillar 1 and 2 are the pillars I am consistently and insistently working on. So what are the pillars that you can get behind to ensure that something begins to change? Change in the Balance Act, you slide shift. They added children, they also added the elderly. So there is some changes in policy. There needs to be strategy and reporting in multi-sectoral collaboration. We say that a lot, but what does that look like? Right? And then there's education, awareness, and training. And to a very large extent, these are some of the wheels that are beginning to move. How do you protect me walking down the street? Right? How do you protect me from my choices? Far more important is an environment that is safe and allows all of us to thrive. And this has, at this level, and in the next levels and multiple levels, that's where we need to begin to see movement. And much does safety look like? How do we allocate money? How of not treating children better is what we are talking about today. The causation is how we treat children from the onset, right? Because children belong to themselves. All we have to do, like government, is to create an enabling and safe environment for them to grow and thrive. And so a child cannot be afraid of you, because what that teaches them is that fear is natural and it should be spread. Right. So when you talk about causation, it's really important for us to remember. And then to go to Uzi. To go to Uzi, I remember the emotional thing that you're talking about. And we need to remember that emotion is important because all of logic in the whole wild world is built from emotion. Whoever developed, innovated, started from either a frustrated place or an excited place. But they built logic from their emotions. So we cannot be void of emotions. So if you are told, leave the room, go shopping, Jomi, it's fine. The work will continue. That said, consequences for false allegations are inscribed in the law. If someone falsifies an allegation, you can press a charge. Doesn't matter what is in question. So even with a false rape charge, if it's a false rape charge, you can press a case, you can start a case against that person. And then you can outline what that looked like and what your experience was. So false allegations across the board exist because people lie. And so it's there and there is consequences for it. I do not know how great a consequence for a false allegation about rape is, because in this country, those are few and far between. You see them because you are in the work. If you're outside of the work, even when it has happened to you, the fear of going to a report cripples you so much that you don't bother. So we do not have a surge of false allegations of rape. What we do have a big problem is unreported rape. I sympathize and empathize with people who have had to deal with such, and parents of that boy. I too am a boy mom, but I will always believe women. Because more often than not, a woman will not report. More often than not, a queer person will not report because it's inconvenient. And you will have someone come out a year later and again, you'll be back in harm's way. So for me, it's not to minimize what you're saying. I'm saying in terms of cost, it's higher for women and queer people. And men need to really get it together and congregate and do the work. You see what you're doing? You're doing well. This rebrand mission you're on is very important because we can no longer afford to have men that rape and kill and beat and swear and harass. And then when it comes to, I love your name. I love your name. And when it comes to what are we doing about intimate partner violence, the fragmentation in what we call community is probably one of the worst things that has ever happened to us, because we no longer look out for each other, and therefore justice is not immediate in the shape that it takes. And so we rely on the law. And the law listens to me, who has been hard done by, and now it has begun to say, Zekano, you have a responsibility to report. If you do not report, and we find out that you knew and you did not report, we will fine you or you will be in jail for 3 months. So you can no longer be an onlooker who does nothing. If it can be proven that you knew and you did nothing, then there's a possibility of incarcerating for you for being complicit. For being complicit. So there's a little bit of a small shift. The domestic violence also includes now children and also elderly people, because we know the extent at which in domestic spaces, elderly people are treated terribly. So there is a bit of a shape and a move, but there's also communal responsibility. We cannot reassign that. We have to be involved.
Thank you so much. No, don't be shy, guys. Let's clap. Thank you so much. We're stepping into the second round of questions. There was a hand I noted here. Washa. No, I love this, by the way, guys. But engati, your hands can go up higher so that I can see the urgency of this. So can I please go 1, 2, and 3 for this round? And for the third round, I will go 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll take more hands after that. The first hand was? Here.
Sanibona. Yoni ngizongixolela sisi ulusakhiwe ngoba ngifuna ukukhuluma ngesiZulu. Ngizokwazi ukukhipha lokho ngaphansi. Igama lami nguThobeka ngwamdlalosi. I'll jump to usisi qala. Kunale ayishoyo ukuthi ama cases amaningi uthola ukuthi abantu besifazana abawabikanga ngoba basaba ukubika. Mina ngwakamasho. Ngizokutshena mina ayikho into engilwela njengabantu besifazane kamasho. Every time uthola ukuthi ngizoya epolice station, mhlawumbe uthola ukuthi ingane iyafika ekhaya kumina izongifika izongitshena ukuthi ngireshiwe baba. Mangifika epolice station ngifike ngibike bazosithatha bayosishonisa mhlawumbe erumini encane mayifika ingane kuthiwa ayihlale yodwa bazoyifaka ama question ngokuyiguqula beyitshebona bekhombisa ukuthi lento ayishoyo ingamanga. Ebese yaqhamuka umzali wengane oma wengane afika athi umama ayivele lo uyahlupha kuthiwa sibonile vele leyo iphunyiswa ingane yahamba kuthiwa go back to ekhaya la ehlukumezeke khona. Sinama cases thina amaningi uthola ukuthi ufuna ukuthola i-community forum awazi nokuthi ubani community forum kule ndawo uhlala kuyona. Uzoshaya impempe lekuthiwa ayishawe akho noyedwa ozophuma athi uzosiza umuntu esifazane kuthiwa siyeke ngalezo idaba kodwa asikho isidaba sosuku siphuma emsebenzini siphethe isikhwama ngo10 ebusuku ngoba kunabantu abasebenza ema call center abaphuma o10 11 ebusuku. Ukamasho ubanjwa inkunzi ubanjwe umakhelwane kuthulakala nya. Uthi uye police station your report afika amaphoyisa khona afika athi sisazoyilandela indaba kodwa mawuzothi uyebuyela ngakusasa uyofuna i-case number yalelo cala le ayikho i-case number yakho. So ngikuthanda nje ukukhuluma ngaleyo ukuthi so uma kuthiwa sizobika ivele i-country ayinawo amaphoyisa. I-country ayinawo ama-forums. I-country kahle kahle kwayona ifana nento engekho. Next time mhlawumbe kusasa ekseni siyovuka sekuthiwa siyi-America ngoba sento engekho. Into la ekhona engicabanga mina ukuthi mhlawumbe ingaba i-solution la kuthina e-Africa as i-Africa yonke. Yabo lesiqalile manje yokukhipha ama-cabinet no president. Iyona nto engakwazi ukuthi ingaguqula izwe ngoba kwayibona labo president bethu uthola ukuthi nabo or ama cabinet ethu uthola ukuthi iwona kakhulukazi akuyona le ground yobugebengu ekuyona le ground yama drugs ngoba laba bantu ababulana you can't tell me ukuthi election njengoba kuthiwa kunama territories lo ufika dayisa bulale kuvuka omunye lo omunye ovukayo wathatha ama drugs. Wona lama drugs azangene la eSouth Africa angene kanjani wona lama drugs ukube bekukhona lento ekuthiwa amaphoyisa ukube bekukhona lento ekuthiwa umthetho la eAfrica into kufanele yenzeke kufanele sincishwe lento ekuthiwa yi-freedom ebese sizonikezwa imfundo yamahala ibhedlela zamahala ila uma sancisha i-freedom ila kuyokwazi ukuthi iAfrica ibe right khona iyeke futhi mase sikhishwa futhi kukhishwa nalabo abasiphethe ngoba kwayibona baya remote wabaphethwe ukuba baphethwe ngabe bayakwazi ukuba nama decision umuntu engasho ukuthi ngizogibela ngishona eChina safanele ngiyokhuluma eChina yini oyekhuluma eChina kodwa kuthiwa wena uphethe la shothi automatically nawe uphethwe you've got no control uya remote wa. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you so much. Just before we get into the second question, to briefly capture what or the issues that she mentioned. Firstly, she stays in Guamashu, and the biggest issue she has is that there are cases that happen in Guamashu, especially where a child reports that they've been raped by the father. And then when they are taken to the police station, they are put into a small room on their own and interrogated by police to a point
of where they don't, or they're trying to change the narrative that has come through to the police station. But in addition to that, when the parent comes in, the parent then identifies the child as problematic, and then automatically the police side with the mother, because obviously in reporting this issue, her behavior has called for it to happen, and they don't necessarily believe her. Another issue she raises is those of community forums. The fact that you can be held or robbed by your neighbor and nothing happens. And even when a case is open, you go there, it's either it's not open, or if it was open, it hasn't had any developments happen. And the last thing that she raises is something that we can all identify with, which is a leadership issue. The fact that there are things that are prioritized in this country, where even our president, there are things that happen in the country, but he has international trips that he has to take and doesn't necessarily address the issues. So she feels as if even the leadership that we have currently needs to completely change if we're to be able to see the change that we speak about at grassroots level. Ngiyabonga kakhulu for that. Angazi noma ngiku. Very well done. Now the school fees is talking, guys. Can we please go to the second question, just by a show of hands, so that we can get the mic to the person who was number 2? There we go. I can translate for you as well.
Hi, my name is Pranay. So there's a few things I want. Hi. Yeah, so there's a few things I want to touch on. First, you mentioned violence, especially with showing children violence in the form that causes later. And a quick anecdote is there was a situation in Durban where there were robbers that had been terrorizing the community, and eventually the community captured the robbers, and they were in a car and had them surrounded, and they wanted to set the car on fire. And I want to just shout out Talani from Durban Sector 2, because he de-escalated the situation and managed to get the police there and stop the community. And people asked, they should have just set them on fire. They were hurting people. And why are you sympathizing? And it's not a case of necessarily sympathizing with the criminals. It's we didn't want children to see human beings being set on fire in a community and then set that as the precedent of what you can do to someone who's wronged you. Because when does the line be drawn then? Do you hurt people when they rob you, when they disrespect you, when someone talks back to you? When do you stop hurting them as a consequence of them wronging you? So that's a very important cultural thing, because if we let that happen, our next generation is going to be a culture of people who just commit random acts of violence. And then we're in a huge problem. The second thing is, there was once a woman who called me because she had been threatened with a knife outside her home. And she wanted to go inside, and she needed my help to contact police to come to her. And police weren't available, and they told me to tell her to go to the police station the next day. But she was afraid to do that, because she was afraid that by leaving her house, she was either going to get attacked by the same person on the way there, or then attacked on the way back once he had found out that she had reported him. And that brings me to my question. And just to clarify, solving these issues is a very micro example, a micro situation, and it's a holistic problem that needs to be solved with lots of different moving parts, from police not listening to children to a bunch of things. But one thing that kept coming up is lack of resources in police stations. And not necessarily money, but human resources. So one thing our brigadier always said was, people are off sick, there's no available police officers. That's why they couldn't go to the lady, because there was maybe 2 patrol units on call that night. If there's 5 women being attacked in a single night, which one gets the help? And a huge issue that kept coming up is police officers were always either off sick, unavailable, or going through some sort of issue. And so the question is, how do you manage workers' rights on one hand? Because police officers do go through a lot, and some of them are sick. But at the same time, how do you manage that with the needs of the community? At what point does a police officer become unfit for duty and have to be removed or replaced, so that there's active, able bodies able to respond to people on call? And maybe there needs to be regulations for a filtration process of people coming in who pass maybe empathy tests, some sort of emotional evaluation. So when they get to people who are dealing with issues, they're not completely lost and are just sort of brushing them off. So yeah, thank you. Prane, P-R-A-N-E.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Vernice. I'm from the NESA NPO in Newlands East. Vusiwe, my question to you is, yes, you say that as a community, we need to report acts that we see and we will be held responsible. I fully agree with you. However, unfortunately, it doesn't work. Simply because we've reported many incidences to our police department. I've had a neighbor that's constantly for the last few years beating our son almost to death. I phoned the police. When I phone them, I tell them, can you please come with a social worker? They come alone. They get there, they tell me I must phone the social worker. Eventually, months later, I drive myself to the social workers. I get there, I tell them I have a problem. There's a woman that's beating a child. This is going on forever. They tell me I must go to the police station. I must write out an affidavit. I don't have the time to do all that. Actually, at the end of the day, what is their responsibility? When we go back, apartheid days, we never had these issues. Apartheid days, if there was a problem, the welfare was there at your door. You didn't even have to tell anyone. They were removing your child. Now, everything is so lax because nobody knows what their job descriptions are. So, yes, you should be held accountable. But when you try to act as an activist and then you get no support. So I think actually these talks need to go into communities. These talks need to happen with the powers that be. They need to be part of these talks. We need to have SAPs there. We need to have our social workers there. We need to have all these people so that we can hold them accountable. You know, we can't keep doing this thing. And as an MPO, we have limited resources. There's only so much that we can do to assist. And then gender-based violence, you know, gender-based violence, it's such a constant thing that when you say gender-based violence, we had a reading program and it was high school students. And the book they were reading was on gender-based violence. And we asked them after reading this book, what do you think is gender-based violence? After reading that book, all they could get out of it was that it's a man hitting a woman. Unfortunately, there is such a limited idea of what gender-based violence is. Because today, in our community, that part of gender-based violence is existing, but not as much as we have children that are beating their parents. They are taking the money from their parents because they want drugs. That is huge gender-based violence. Nothing is getting done about that because the mothers are in denial. And then the mothers are coming to us and they're saying, I've never been terrified of my child in my whole life, but we can't help you because you don't want to act. You don't want your child to be on the street. You don't want your child to be a para. What happens? 6 months down the line, the mother's critical in hospital. We have about, say, 80 of those cases in our community. So what is going to get done about that? Because gender-based violence, it's not just physical violence. It's financial violence. It's emotional violence. It's children as well as grandparents. People that are robbing their grandmothers of their pensions and things like that. There's so much more to GBV that the community knows about. So I'd like to just ask you, please, we need this to come into our communities and we need more powers that be responsible to be part of these talks.
All right. So I'm going to disappoint you by saying, first of all, I don't have the answers, but you do, because you live there. So this is a co-creation space. We need to do the future thinking. In fact, almost effective immediately thinking. What are we willing to do? You know, that question, the comment from Otobeka around, you know, we used to have Tutuzela centers that were well functioning, that a child would not have to go to a police station. They would go to a full service Tutuzela center and they would get examined, then everything would be recorded there so that they don't have to experience secondary traumatization by going to the police station. Those were defunded. I'm saying defunded because there's literally no reason where you have an epidemic of this measure in a country and you have less and less of those centers instead of more and more. So we used to have those. Some of them are still functioning, I'm not really sure. We would have to check together if they do Guamashu, but I know that we used to have those, and those worked maybe too well. And so maybe some of the answers to the questions we're asking about making sure that the cost is not so high is, how do we lobby to have those back, because we need them? Older people, me, you, everybody needs to be able to know that I'm going to a place that's safe and I can report, and I don't have to care to be received by someone not only who has their conception of what this could be, but also I still have to go to a doctor or go to someone who's going to counsel me. Full service used to be a thing that we experienced, and we no longer have that. So there's a question around lobbying for that, for more of that, because some of them still exist, but for more of that. And then I can't touch on the other stuff around our freedoms. I think one of the most important thing about our freedoms is the capacity to experience a better life. And we need that, right? We need that. But we need to then be accountable to about who we give the power to be able to access and exercise our freedoms. Because if we keep giving it to the same people who minimize our life expectancy, who we continue to live undignified lives, we now need to look at ourselves in the mirror to say, why do we keep doing this to ourselves, right? And so the responsibility is for those who are in power, but then right now we have an opportunity to shift that for ourselves. And then the question around worker management and community needs. If you know anything about me, is that you will know that I stand up for civil servants. Why? Because working in a resource scarce place is the most frustrating thing. We had a brigadier in Gauteng who was asking, we want to shift, we want to change this form so that when people come to report, we can capture this in a way that gives emergency to specific groupings. No one is giving this person an answer. No one is even resourcing that question. So you have numbers of LGBTI, violent, intimate partner, domestic violence that are not captured because no one is responding to the question is, how do we begin to do this? There's a research aspect of the NSP. This is research work. You need to research how do you ensure that someone is able to report in this particular way without secondary victimization. No one's doing that. And then when it comes to workers in police station, police don't get debriefed. They see all sorts of monstrosities. Nobody debriefs them because they must just keep going. And we require them to work optimally. So what is our responsibility towards the people who do this work that we need them to do, right? And so for me, before you performance manage the police, how do you humanize the police so that they function better? I understand corruption, I understand all of these things, but it's your uncle, it's my aunt, it's my sister who's a police person, and some of those people want to do the work, but they're not debriefed. And even if they were debriefed, you don't have a simple thing as a pen to write when you have an affidavit to write. What happens then? So for me, it's like communities have a responsibility to almost feed into, and this is why today is so important, because we need to begin to imagine that if something changes, what causes it to change, that causation question, at what cost? What are we willing to do? And then begin to shift that. Because the service is the service until we change as the people who require it. And then the question around third party observing and reporting, it's also another resource question, right? So now all of us go to a report. We're like, we can see on looking, we're reporting to the police station, and then the police is like, oh, I've had 150 cases just today. We live in a country that there's high austerity measures when it comes to health and safety. By austerity, I mean that they want to save, the money goes elsewhere. And so when the resources are needed, they're not available. So when you say you need a police van, that person could be willing, but there's no van. You know? So it's like, there's a requirement for us to insistently imagine a different country. I don't mind personally to have 150 reported cases and have the police staring back at us and going, we don't have resources, instead of having 150 non-reported cases and have a bunch of people thinking they can go wild in our communities. So there is almost like, we have to insist. We have to, with all of our hearts, we have to insist on difference, because once there's a demand, there has to be a shift.
Thank you so much. We had identified hands for the next round of questions. Oh, number one. Number one? Sorry, I'm doing.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Mtutuzi Ntlumayo from Umlazi, and don't even know where to begin. For us, it's not Kaleni. That's the thing for being in South Africa. First of all, I would like to say, I like what you said about us being perpetrators by hitting our children. So now the question is the society not playing a role in violence that is being done by males, especially on how we are brought up as males? Because these things start even in grade R, in primary schools. I once talked about it with the mayor's office. We planned to make a program, and unfortunately it did not happen. I would like to just make a typical example. When it comes to males, we know we are not supposed to hit females, even in primary schools. And when it happens that you hit a female, you get punished. And when it's the other way around, a female is being told you are not allowed to hit a male, and nothing happens. And this thing happens almost everywhere around the country, especially with African males. And then nobody's doing anything about it until a male decides to take a stand, and no one actually understands what happened. And as males, I think we are in trouble because there are so many things we are faced with personally, and a human being can only take so much. And males are more physical beings than emotional beings. And I think something needs to happen. And unfortunately, working in the community development structures, there's only one thing I know. It's me calling Uzi, calling Brian when I need help. I can help instantly. But when it actually comes to these people, we are saying we need to hold them accountable. They are not doing anything. That's the reality of being in South Africa. So for me, sometimes I don't like saying I want to be involved in gender-based violence cases, because my interest is males. Because without males, these things cannot happen. And without females, these things cannot happen. So for us, I think we need to mostly focus on males. And I think what this country lacks is the value for a human being and the role of a female and a male in society. Because if we go back and actually teach the younger children the value of themselves, I think these things would stop. Because concerning on Umlazi, we are in trouble. I think we spoke about it with Nonkululeko and Uzi. For the past 3 weeks, my best friend was shot. We have been working in the same space. Nothing has happened. The people who did that, they are known in the community. The police station is not doing anything. And we are connected enough for them to actually act, but they are not doing anything. A week ago, one of the guys we work with in the same structures was actually attacked by the CPF. They just identified him. They never asked anything. They beat him up. Nothing is happening. That's the reality of the stories and the things we are facing in the community. So if we keep on kidding ourselves and saying we should hold the leaders accountable, we know they are not working. But one thing I know is the value of the people that I work around. If I call Nonkululeko and say, I'm in trouble, even with Mbali and Meki as my friends, even if they call it at 1 o'clock, I will be there to assist. But when it actually comes to communities, doing the same thing puts your own life in danger. I've been threatened so many times. I don't know even how many times I need to count. Even my brother, he's a cop. He told me that I wouldn't mind if I get a call and I'm being told that you've been shot. Because what you're doing in the community, it's all good, but no one wants you to actually speak about these things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sanibonani. Igama udinga wanzimande. Esayidini lami nginalokhu ukuthi senotolika ngesilungu. Esayidini lami nalokhu ukuthi iphoyisa malizosebenzela ngakubo ngeke luyenze umsebenzi. Ngoba uma ungasekhaya unabangani unezihlobo uzombopha kanjani lo muntu mayenza inkinga kule ndawo ngakubo ngoba even iphoyisa nalo lisebenza linokusabela impilo yalo nalo angithi so uma siyibuka lento kufanele ngabe yonke lento iyashintsha ukuthi uma uwase KZN hamba usebenzele kwenye province nenye province iletha abayo ngapha so lento yokushintsha and umuntu uzosebenza ngokuzimisela enze into right because awukwazi ukuthi unama cousins la unama friends nama siblings ngeke umbophe lo muntu wakini masenze inkinga la ngoba usebenza ngasekhaya alright phinde ngibuyele lapha angithi yonke lento ye GBV enye kidalo into ezincane nje uthola ukuthi mina ngiwumuntu wesilisa as a male uthiwa nginengane ihlala noma wayo kuzoba khona lento ukuthi kufanele ngiyisupport njenganobaba ngithi but mayihlala nami ke ngubaba umama kurele azothola khona umuntu wesilisa uthi ufuna imali yesondlo kuma wengane angijabule lezo zinto uthola ukuthi lento ngale khathi mina ngithuli noma ngingasebenzi kodwa kufanele ngikwenza amamenzi ukuthi lengane idle noma iphile lapha but umama uyapapruka wenza zonke izinto right ayithi ngane hlala nami ngibe ngizibona ukuthi mangabe ngizofuna imali kuma wengane ngathi ngizidlisa isithunzi so lento yokuzama ukufuna ukumela ubundoda noma ngingasavumi ezinye zeinkinga esibhekana nazo lezo yabo bese ngibe ngiyibuyisele lapha isimo esiphila noma isikhathi esiphila kusona sinobunzima ngoba nibukile ilooting abanye bayibuke ngalendlela ukuthi abanye bathi bathola izinto for free nani yabo kukhona baze bathola ngisho izibhamu lezi zibhamu ezenza icrime ibe nje manje kufika izibhamu kubantu abangawazi umthetho ukuthi isibhamu siphathwa kanjani and bayazi isibhamu asireport indawo noma ngenza inkinga bulala umuntu ayikho into ezokwenzeka ngalesi sibhamu asiphethe konke lokho ilooting ifike yashintsha abantu ingqondo even umuntu wesifazane aphathe fridge ahambe nalo mhlambe for about 2 kilometers kodwa mase kuthole lo fridge manje alibuyele emuva ngeke asakwazi ngoba liseliyasinda manje yabo so izinto nje esidlula kuzona siyi community even ipoverty yona ebuyidale zonke lezi inkinga ezikhona right ngibuye ngiyibuyisile la ngalesikhathi seCovid amaphoyile zonke indawo esihlala kuzona ethi singaphumi emakhaya ngoba kuthiwa sispreader le COVID angithi why ki COVID igadwe kangaka bese kuye kwi crime even ne GBV ibe kanje? Akithi senze njani ukuze silungise isimo esinjalo? Ngicela ukubonga.
Testing 1, 2. Thank you so much. So the issues that came up, one, now I can't read my handwriting. Yes, so the first point was around police services, and his view is that if a police officer works in an area that they grew up, it becomes difficult for them to do their jobs because they are living with people who they grew up with, families in the same community. So if any of those people are accused or find themselves on the wrong side of the law, it becomes difficult for the police officer to then arrest a family member. The second point he raised was around GBV and this notion of the responsibility of men in society. And one of the examples that he put forward was, if you're a man who has a child, but the child lives with the mother, you are required to provide child support. However, if the child lives with you, it becomes tricky as the man to then go knocking on the door of the mother of the child and want child support, even at a point where you can't financially support the child. And again, it goes back to the responsibility or how men are seen in communities as being providers, even when they financially cannot provide. The third point he makes reference to is the looting. How, when it came to looting, we profiled a whole lot of refrigerators. We saw them in our streets, TVs up and down the streets, but we also didn't have a conversation around the guns that were stolen during looting. Guns that landed in the hands of people who didn't know how to work them, but equally those guns committed crimes that could not be tied back to those people because they stole the guns. And lastly, he speaks about how we saw police visibility during COVID. You know, like if you were outside of the house at a particular time, you knew that you were going to get stopped. And his question is around why aren't the same amount of police visible to curb crime and to curb gender-based violence? You will find the translation services at risemzansi.org, or you can go. I'm kidding. Yeah, but I'm not kidding. And then the last question, third hand for this round.
Sanbonani, igama lami uHlengiwa kaMsomi from Umphakathi Foundation, an organization elwa ne-GBV, kakhulukazi amalungelo abesifazane nayingane. Ngizoqala from our comments from my fellow delegates here, especially the drugs, our freedom in apartheid era. We had this conversation that during the apartheid era, even though it was hard, but it happened that the police will randomly do the raids. We won't be having so much illegal firearms, all the drugs that are around, and the crime, because all these factors, the firearms, the drugs, are also the factors that causes the GBV. Ne? So it's so sad because there's a show that shows on Mocha in Zoctola, they raid drugs. It's so sad that the government hasn't done anything to help that guy to fight the drugs in the community, because the drugs is a major problem especially in the townships. I work in the township of Umlazi. So it's a big issue. And then I will go back to Carita's presentation. Thank you so much, Sissy, for unpacking GBV, because as women, we have that thing of wanting to own GBV, that GBV is just for women. So you unpacking it like that, it's really I think giving an insight, because I think we should talk more about other genders besides the women. So what caught my eye on your presentation is that the economic power. Economic power. I am a child who grew up in a tax environment. My mother would not leave the marriage because she was financially dependent to my father. And that caused myself and my siblings a childhood trauma. So in my journey of being a GBV activist, I've came across so many cases that I cannot leave because I don't have financial means. Even a man, I came across a man on our last dialogue, he said he lost his job, and the girlfriend, they stayed together with the girlfriend. She started calling him names. So that is abuse to a man because he has lost economic power. So it comes to my comment here that financial dependency can contribute to the perpetuation of GBV. To combat this issue, it is crucial to explore policy approaches that can address this factor by focusing on policies that promote economic independence and reduce financial vulnerability. We can work towards eliminating this factor and fight GBV efficiently. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ngiyabonga Sisi. I think that was 3 hands. Kanyisa, would you like to take them now or?
Yeah, I'll take
All
them.
right, cool.
Firstly, thank you. Thank you. I think underscoring the question around financial power is really important. In fact, the notion of power is very much a resource question, right? Because when, to a very large extent, you're able to support and sustain yourself, then, of course, there are other factors at play, but you are at a better place than someone who doesn't have. And again, it's a question around what are we willing to do, because we used to live in a country that had colleges where you could learn trade and you could then function from trade, because not all of us are academically inclined or are looking to career in that direction. So the question around for us here, again, I don't think anyone's actually answered my question. We're answering questions this entire day. No one has answered my question around what safety looks like for us. You know, I really need to know, and we need to qualify that. Like, because when we speak about economic accessibility of oneself as a form of safety and freedom, there's many other factors at play. So I'm hoping that in the roving of the microphone, someone answers the question around safety, because I want us to qualify it. We cannot walk out of this room without an imagination of what that looks like, right? And then to go back to the question around children, very soft spot. And then how we rear these people to become this kind of nation that we imagine, and how from a very young age we give cues of behaviors that, oh, boys don't hit girls, but girls, you can carry on just not like that, right? So there's a question around what is our understanding of systemic injustice from very tiny, right? Where you almost program children to behave in a particular way. Most of us in this room have had to unlearn programming, right? And that's why you are trying to imagine a different kind of men, because you have to unlearn programming. And I think there is then a question around, now that you know, Mdu, now that you know, how do you work with, as you do the work, how do you work with boys? How do you work with schools so that you begin to shift what that is in your circle of influence, right? And I'm saying it back to you because you've already started imagining what difference can look like. As you say, some of these people, we can't hold them accountable. There is a pillar around leadership and accountability in the NSP. How do you tap into that and qualify it as a determination and requirement for accountability, right? Where you could physically get hurt any day. Like, what kind of existence is that? And who is accountable for that? So in your circle of influence, what are the possibilities? And that's not to say that you have all the power. It's a question in this room for us to qualify. How do we begin to shift this thing where it's unsafe for you to try work towards your community's safety? How the hell does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. So qualify, what do we do? How do we imagine differently to support the question of safety in Mdu's community, right? And the question around focusing on men, and I wanted to say this before I go spiraling to another direction.
there's something around language that males and females. Yeah. Males and females is sex assigned at birth. You have a vagina, you have a penis. This is a sex assigned at birth. But that's not my identity. So when you speak, you are outsiding other people's. So it's really important when we speak about things to be aware of what we're saying. So for example, in this room, we spoke about men, women, and other gender identities. You might look at me and see a woman. Ne? But do I identify as a woman? You don't know, right? So when you say males and females, you are almost immediately othering me, because you're saying based on the sex that the doctor saw at birth, then I am that. You're not giving expression to my identity. So I just wanted to, it's an ongoing crusade, but I wanted us to bring us just to say that the males and females chat is important if you are at the doctor's and there's a procedure that needs to happen. But in this room, there needs to be a level of safety around my identity, right? So men and women. Idea of safety that we begin to imagine for the future of this country. So you are not wrong by thinking that. In fact, you are very correct. We need you to do that work. Keep at it. And the question then is, how do you get the resources supported with the work that you are beginning to do? And I see that you're saying that you're supported and maybe you need more support, which is more important. So in terms of, there's talk therapy, there's little round things that we do, then the question becomes, when you feel like you need to talk about or express your frustration, where do we go? Then that's another question. How do I, as a man who feels like society is not able to hold me, speak about the things that I go through and feel like I am safe and I am held and I can walk out of that space feeling lighter, but knowing that I'm held? What does that look like, right? And then there's Utinga, kuningiest. Because this same thing I'm speaking to around, this idea that we hold so dearly about who we are in the world, whether we're men or women, and wanting to fight for this identity to a point where it puts us at a deficit. And then that frustrating builds, and then it becomes something else, which is verbally or physically violent. And it's something that Umdu actually touched on when he says, men are more physical and less emotional. That is not true. Because if it was true, we wouldn't see such an outpour of physical violence that stems from emotion. And then you deliver your frustration or your pain in a physical way. So the qualification of your identity by emotion or lack thereof is untrue. The question then is, how do I become safe enough to know that my emotions are held and that I can fall apart and I can ask for support because I have a community and it doesn't matter that I'm a man, right? So it's just those things that we need to really imagine in this room and speak of, because it is very clear that it's necessary and it is needed. And we are not doing well without it.
Thank you so much. For those who have, oh, sorry, you can have. For those who have joined us recently on the live stream, we are at Maharani Hotel in Durban, currently holding our 4th policy gathering at RISE Mzansi. Please do drop your comments. The theme today is safety and the economic cost of GBV in South Africa. So what I would like to do is take the last round of 3 hands, people who have not spoken yet. Yes, power of facilitation. So people who we haven't heard their voices as yet. And once we do that, we'll do a quick activity I'm also going to be quite selective in terms of representation. So can I please have one? And I also know the work that you do, and I'm really sorry for the guys that I won't choose. Can I please have two? And then can I please have three? For those of you who I have not selected, please do drop your comments on 072 400 7503. That is 072 400 7503. That is our RISE Mzansi WhatsApp line. Same equates to the guys who are online. If you can't get through to the chats for whatever reason, when you do see this recording, please drop us a line on WhatsApp and add your inputs there. So again, just by a show of hands, our number one is here. Our number two is there. And then lastly, our third hand for this round is there. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jalen Reddy from Zero Waste Durban. I think firstly, we need to recognize that you don't have to primarily be a GBV activist to talk about gender-based violence. And we have to recognize the intersectionality of our own line of work with GBV. It's a fact that women, children, and people of the LGBTI community are most affected by climate change. And waste pickers in this country, suffer every day from a lack of waste management infrastructure and unsafe working conditions. And 80% of waste pickers in this country are women. I think something we need to tackle is chauvinism and misogyny within our own networks. Because personally, I've experienced cases at conferences, at meetings, of discrimination against women, against people of the LGBTI community. And as activists, we should be championing, firstly, justice, and we should be championing upholding human rights. And that should be the foundation of all work that we do.
Thank you so much.
Sanibonani, ngibonge kakhulu nonkululeko. Sisikhanyisa, maybe just to give a quick response to your question, ukuthi yini esiyibukayo, what do we envision thina? For us is to create violence-free zones. That's the only thing we need to see happening in our own spaces. Sifuna ukuhlala endaweni zethu, sibe safe, ungabi nefiye yokuthi uzohlangana nomuntu wesilisa, maybe is there to rape you, maybe is there to rob you, or maybe is there to kill you. Standing in front of you, uMakantokozo Ziqubu, who was gunned down 3 weeks back. On the road, la sihlala khona, ebuya emsebenzini. This Ntokozo I'm talking about, she was an educated young lady, onga groovy. She had 2 degrees. She focused on her school. And over and above that, she committed herself in working for the community. Ube CAB member, Yaka Caprice at the research institution. Esebenza as a project manager, NPO, giving back to the community. And she was also a facilitator, empowering youth to be in a position where they empowered, they emancipated, and they can be adorned to reach whatever ambitions they have in life. But because of EGPV that we're looking into, when I tap back to what Uwarara was saying, Sine NSP, GBVF, which as a country, it was declared, Oguti, it's a pandemic. Like it was declared, Ugewasho, one of ama speakers, Uguti Sibene COVID, when it was declared as a pandemic, izinto sibonile zenzeka i-COVID. But GBV, we seem to be moving in all different ways, which are not making value. Sibene second summit, presidential summit, but there are no tangible fruits that are coming from that exercise. A whole lot of amount was spent in that event, but always we are saying civil society needs to be involved. And unfortunately for KZN, on the 29th of August, Women's Month, our own premier decided to hold a meeting ezo endorser ukuthi sekuzoba khona ama-GBVF RRT responders which have not been part of a civil society. Further to that, our very own mayor eThekwini hold a lift-off workshop isolating a civil society. And when you look at the police is saying 51% civil society and government only holds 49%. Ukuthi-ke, kahle kahle, what exactly are we doing? Why do we have such policies in place and yet we're failing to implement them? Or not even implementing them, we're failing to apply our processes correctly. Right now, there was a debate, we even having a wrong schedule. Yeah, you're the NSP, as a bill that we've promulgated. But recommendations have been made, but people at the top, they are turning a blind eye to such submissions. Uguti, maybe from your side, because we are trying to ensure that we echo our voices to create this safe space, to ensure that we end GBV. We are here, but it seems as if our submissions are falling on deaf ears. Uguti, maybe if we can get maybe a solution on how then do we move forward, mesifuna ukuthi see your creator izinto ezoba a meaningful impact. Ngoba right now, funding has been secured to create GBVF app, but layer app yenziwa without a consultation with a civil society. Is it going to be working, or is it going to be another wasteful expenditure? So these are some of the things we need to look into. Good, yes, I'm a policy they there, but if a leadership is failing to bring people to the table, how do we then change the status quo? I think that's what we need to deliberate on. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Wayne. I'm from an organization called Freedom South Africa, and we deal with assisting people that have come in conflict with the law. So earlier on, I heard mention of certain categories of people that we normally call vulnerable groups. And by the way, we create those vulnerable groups, okay? Everybody's born equal. We create vulnerable groups by labeling people and pushing them to the side. So we know that there's lots of people in the LGBTI community. There's sex workers that have also come in conflict with the law. We know in our city, there's lots of people that are being criminalized for standing on the side of the road. Okay, so we got all these different bylaws that then criminalize people, and then that prevents them from continuing with a decent life. Okay, and we see that in lots of different communities around the country. And part of the work that we do is we assist people with clearing of those criminal records. Okay? So for me today, it's an invitation to all people that are part of these so-called vulnerable groups and the organizations to have those conversations and say, how do we empower your organizations to provide these services to your constituents? I think we speak about resources and the lack of resources. We've done the work. We've got the resource is available to anybody and to everybody in the country. It's a free resource. So there's nobody making money off it. It's just simply a tool that's out there to assist all community members within the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. And just before you respond to the last round of questions, Kanyisa, can I just insert a quick activity for us? Going back to the question that you keep asking. So the question Ukanyisa keeps asking is, what does safety look like to us? So if you were to wake up tomorrow and by some magic, you woke up in a very safe community, what would be the one thing that you can point at and say, all right, now I'm safe? So it might vary from different people because we come from different communities. But what I'd like us to do is, there are notepads on every single table. Everybody should have it. To please turn to a blank page. At the top, write your name, write your surname, and then write a one-liner as to what does a safe space or a safe community look like for you. So your name at the top, name and surname. You can also add the organization that you come from or the NGO if you would like to. But the question is, what does a safe community look like for you? Like, what is it? When will you know you are in a safe community? What will be the telling factor? So we'll do that for the next 2 minutes. And when you're done, can I please ask that you fold the piece of paper and hand it to the person who is on this aisle? And on this side, it will be the person to your left. And then we'll just quickly collect those. And once we collect those, Kanyisa will then answer the last 3 questions that were asked. Again, what do safe communities look like for you? So mesikhuluma ngimphakathi ephephile, sikhuluma ngani? Uzokwazi ngani ukuthi hayi ke njengami ke ngunonkululeko sengiphephile ke la because of ABC. So what we're asking for iwona lo ABC esikhuluma ngawo. Ngiyabonga kakhulu. So that is 2 minutes. I will let you know when you have a minute left, and then we'll round those up while Ukanyisa responds to the last set of questions. Once this is done, and then I'll release you. You can stay standing. Yes. Because when this is done. So again, if you're done and you're in this row, please pass it to the person on your right. If you are in this row, please pass it to the person who is on the far end on your left. And then can I just quickly hand over to Ukanyisa while everybody wraps up? She'll just respond to the last 3 questions. Ngiyabonga.
All right. Whew. Yeah. So I don't think that you need me to say anything about the question of what we're costing the planet, and also just discrimination and the injustice that happens within the environmental space. We can see it world over, who has to carry the burden of emissions, but we also see it microcosmically in communities. And just to add, outside of gender-based violence, the biggest emergency that we have is a climate emergency. We're living on an earth that can no longer hold us because we keep behaving in the ways that we're behaving. Mandos, I firstly, for being here, I appreciate you. And just contextually being able to give us clarity around what the NSP looks like in real terms. versus what we were hoping for. Something that happens in this country when policy meets budget, right? So we write these beautiful frameworks and we imagine these beautiful things. And as soon as budget is released, suddenly there's a scramble, and people decide whatever we started with is no longer important. What is important is how to line these pockets. So for me, I think there's something that the TAC did. Do you remember what the TAC did? Can you remember? The class action. Do you remember that? Yes. So the treatment action campaign took the South African government to court when people were not able to access antiretroviral treatment. And that action shifted access to health services, specifically to medication, drastically. Beyond that, the South African government has not experienced anything of that nature. And I think that specifically with something this important, there is almost a need for us to figure out how do we articulate a class action for gender-based violence against the South African government, understanding the loss of life involved, understanding the loss of resources that we spoke about, but also understanding just how much communities are struggling. I'm yet to find framing for the amount of disaster that we're experiencing as a country and how there has been such light touches. And even as you speak about the GBVF app, as you speak about how funds are being dispersed, there is great injustice, and primarily because there's a sense of unimportance because of who is affected by gender-based violence. We cannot run away from the fact that once something is women and children and LGBTI inclined, suddenly it's not as important. I'm not even going to touch on sex workers because for whatever reason, even the decriminalizing of sex work has taken a backseat. So maybe there's people who understand the flow of class actions and able to articulate it. There's a need to take this government to task because we have a constitution and what is happening is unconstitutional. It's criminal activity against an entire country. People are dying. We're in a state of emergency, as you correctly say, where the army and the police were out during COVID because it was a state of emergency. But gender-based violence is a state of emergency and we don't see the same level of activity. So for me, there's a big question in my mind, and I thought my intrusive thoughts can win today around what does a class action suit against this government when it comes to gender-based violence look like? Because we can speak about submissions, people can get some funds to continue to do the work in community. But honestly, there's a government responsibility to have an environment where people can thrive. And people are not thriving. And the government needs to be an accused in a court and respond. So there's no short answer to this question. As civil society, we can apply for funds and hope that some of us are able to access them and resource this work. But there's a bigger question around one of the pillars, which is accountability and leadership or lack thereof, where we need to figure out, maybe I should put out an advocacy call around the class action against the government, because we're suffering. Resources that could be channeled to our children's free education need to go to something else, billions of rands. So I'm asking the question, what does a class action suit look like against the South African government for this pandemic? What does it look like? And then the question around, I think it was an open call to say that if you need support,
with resourcing and understanding and educating in your organization, you can reach out to Wayne. As you say, vulnerable grouping is not a naturalized thing. It's a thing that's assigned, but we have a responsibility to hold and humanize ourselves and the people who are being othered in our communities. Sex workers bring us up. Sex workers are our mothers, our sisters, our friends, hardworking people whose work is criminalized, and the beneficiaries, because they benefit, are criminalized too. So what are we willing to do when it comes to that? When a person is not a criminal, but they're criminalized, and then the criminals are just sitting pretty. What are we willing to do? I think outside of the question around the cost of gender-based violence, it really is a call for community. It really is a call for community. There's a question around our sense of community. There's a big question around our sense of community and experiences of that community as well. So as we organize in our civil society organizations, as we organize in our movements, we have families to organize to. Because if there's disparities there, those are going to translate everywhere else. There's no running away from it. Thank you.
A louder and a huge round of applause for our speaker, Ukanyisa Boy. Siyabonga kakhulu, siyabonga kakhulu. Can I please, I think this is a fitting time for me to introduce our Civic Alliances Coordinator, Irfan Mangera. He sits at the National Leadership Collective. And I think he'll also just, picking up from where you left off, Kanyisa, the role of civil society moving forward. He's going to be touching on that and unpacking what that looks like for us in South Africa as civil society, whether it's organizations, movements, religious groups, but he'll obviously unpack that for us. A huge round of applause for Irfan Mangera.
Sanbonani, Dumelang, Namaste. No, you don't know? Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all so much for being here. It's always great coming to visit Nonkululeko and the team in KZN. I see familiar faces, and I also see faces of activists who have been doing this work consistently. Based on the feedback and the commentary that you've all made, you can clearly see that this issue cuts across all our spheres of work. And as Talon was saying, the intersectionality of it all. And I'm grateful that I have a few minutes to speak. I know it's very short and I'm wary of time. So my inputs will be very direct. There's a reason why RISE Mzansi has a Civic Alliance coordinator. And perhaps, apologies, let me take my hat off. There's a reason why we have this at the national level and in leadership, but also at provincial level and also sector-based levels. Now, GBV has been a pandemic in South Africa for years, decades. And yet we've not seen the same energy, the same impetus that you would have seen last week, perhaps in Sandton when BRICS was happening, where every street corner had police, where there was police vehicles roaming consistently all over. In fact, when government wants to show up, they do when they want to. And clearly, for our day-to-day lives, we're not experiencing that, them showing up. So they're clearly not showing up for us. And that means, how do we shape it in a way that we put in a government that shows up for us, that cares about us, that makes sure that there's a direct partnership with civic alliances, with NGOs, movements, and the many others who exist in society doing this work day to day. And so I'm grateful for all the inputs, but I want to say that for us at a strategic level, we're building a coalition of the people. And a coalition of the people means go to where people are. Go to where people And so for us, building an alliance with you is the key to solving this challenge, because it's how we entrust and build accountability for the politicians, get enough political reform so that when you see governance failing, when you see the police officers not doing the monitoring work, not doing the policing work, we're able to go to that station and say, no, no, no. It's either you deliver or you're out, because there are other people who can get the job done. And that's where I think we need to be looking at. Now, I had a full list of names of organizations doing phenomenal work. Some of the presentation you saw now, you showcased Sonke Gender Justice. There are gender dynamics, tears organizations, power, rape crisis committees. All of our communities have existing structures in place. There are people doing this work. But we can't replace the role and function of the state by trying to outsource this work to NGOs. It won't work. It's important that NGOs exist, but we need that balance where NGOs are putting pressure on the state to make sure it functions. And for us to get there, we need to have more of these discussions. But like you said, Venice, these things have been done over and over. It's not going to exist if we don't take it to communities, but building those structures up from the ground up. Today's discussion featured safety and the economic impact. And someone who comes from civil society, I don't like speaking about the economic impact of something like GBV, because it's putting a economic logic on what I would term a human rights logic. And I got that framing from the same report that was launched. Eusebius Makaiser, who had passed on not too long ago, and condolences to him and his family and friends and partner, because he played such a fundamental role in us and in contesting the ideas we have about GBV and about what the state of it is in this country. And he phrases that logic as looking at, unfortunately, the economic side of things now, and not just where we come from, saying it's against our human rights, men, women, non-conforming people, and so on. And I say this because you can't put the 36 billion rand number on the presentation. We're losing that annually because of GBV. But it shouldn't divorce us from the human aspect of what's existing in society, because that's how we build communities that are safe. That's how we answer the question you put to the table. Our communities are not going to just be built by that. It's going to be built by the person-to-person relations we create. And I'm hoping we can get to that point very soon. Lastly, let me say that number one, commend you all for doing this work, but it's going to take a collective approach. And I like the fact that, there's free services being offered. The gentleman at the back speaking about what, dealing with the issues of criminal records and so on, because that exists. And unfortunately, too many of us get caught up in a dominant culture that exists. RISE is saying, let's imagine something new. Let's imagine a new society that can be built and then pave the way and the steps to get there. Because that's not what is being pivoted and being put and platformed in discussions like this. We are too caught up in the reactionary moments day to day that we're not imagining what is it that we're doing now that will contribute to the life we want to live 10 years from now. And so mobilization efforts, brilliant, well done. Forums, I came back from the Eastern Cape recently. There was men's forums, there was women's forums, there was LGBTQI forums, but they're not speaking to each other. And I think what we need to get towards is more spaces where we can convene people collectively. The ANC had lost that. In the early years, you saw that the significant power was garnered by the ability to convene society. They've lost that ability because we no longer trust from what they say to what they do. And so we ourselves have to reconvene that. And look around you. Just take a second to just look around who is in the room. Look behind, look ahead, look next to, and be deliberate about it, because this is your community. This is your city. If we're not going to be the ones who drive that change, who constantly convene and discuss and debate and pave a way forward, no one's going to do it. And this room is packed. We had to get more tables and chairs. And so well done to all of you for taking the time out to come and engage on this point. I'm hoping that through the register you've signed, we will add you to our Civic Alliances group as well. Because in there's a coordinator specifically for GBV or gender issues. And we will take forward this at various levels, not just in policy, but in campaign work and project-based engagements. And so when we start dealing with this from now, next year, 2024, and way beyond, we develop that culture of active citizenry that is required to deal with this crisis, so that we put the urgency that we saw during COVID, that we saw during these fancy summits that happened, on the agenda constantly. So with that, Nonkululeko, thank you so much for hosting me, and I look forward to the future engagements with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irfan. A huge round of applause again for Irfan Mangera. And he speaks about beginning to imagine a better life. And I think to take it a step further beyond imagining it, we have to begin to design it. And the question that I asked was us taking the first step to being able to design our communities. Because once you're very crystal clear on what the end goal is, we can then begin to work on the steps that get us there. But while we still begin to talk about these high-end, high-level issues, gender-based violence, rural development, at high-level stuff, and not actually call it for what it is, we are not going to come up with solutions that actually end some of the issues that we advocate for in this room. So thank you so much once again for your engagement and being committed to this process, not just the people in this room, but the people who have joined us on the live stream. Just by a show of hands, who currently has the register? There was a register going around. If you haven't signed, there is a guy dressed very well at the end. His hand is up right now. Please make sure that you do sign the register, because as Irfan said, we would like to add you in our Civic Alliances WhatsApp group for us to do actually unpack some of the things that we spoke about today, some of the resolutions that came out and suggestions that came out, and actually begin to action them forward. Having said that, the last person I would like to call up once again, just for final remarks and a closing, is our national chair, Vuyiswa Ramahupa, to please come through and just give us last comments and last opinion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, leaders, for this incredible engagement. I think the spirit in which the conversation has been conducted has been true to the values and the spirit in which we love to engage with our, we don't have members, but we call them our people, the people of RISE. And I consider every one of you in this room to be RISE people. And I thank you so much for your engagements. I just cheated a bit and took some of the notes that we made. I was dying to see what some of us had said. So I haven't actually had a chance to look at them. And I hope you don't mind if I read out one or two of them. So this is from Teresa Laduce. Is that you? Okay. Did I pronounce your name properly? Okay, beautiful. What does a safe community look like for you? Teresa says, where community understands the morals and fundamentals of Ubuntu, by going back to their grassroots of living in harmony, becoming one with each other, regardless of social and economic status and religious belief. The ground, sorry, the ground should not be a realization of the meaning of being human and understanding the what? Oh, yes, you're welcome to. Even better. Please. Sorry, the next talk is on education and literacy.
It's where the community understands the morals and fundamentals of Ubuntu by going back to the grassroots of living in harmony and becoming one with each other, regardless of social and economic status and religious beliefs. The ground root should be the realization of the meaning of being human and understanding that we are all the same, regardless of race, religion, or culture. That will bring us back to the realization and the meaning of the word community.
Thank you so much, Teresa. This person didn't put their name, so they cheated a little bit. But it says to be free and able to live without restrictions, a decolonized criminal justice system. You know yourself who wrote that. If you recognize that, please stand up and claim your words. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Togozani Kumalo. Can I give you an opportunity to share? Do you want to share? Okay, beautiful, Siswam. Here we go.
Ngiyabonga. Engikubhalile phansi mina engakufiswa ukukubona ukuze sibe ne community e-safety mhlambe uma kungashintsha wonke into ethi police ama SAPS wonke ama law enforcement uqalwe phansi kabusha cause even ubhuti uthe umuntu mesebenza ngakubo mhlambe kunzima ukusebenza ngisho umuntu angathatha ayofakwa kwi police station yase Cape Town uzofika yena efuna ukusebenza kahle enze kahle kodwa the fact that ibona banendlela yabo yokusebenza bayambulala umuntu ofike ezokwenza umehluko endaweni yabo bafanele asebenze njengoba benza bona befike ezokwenza umehluko mhlawumbe izosebenza kahle uyabulawa kulo police station. So if you can change all the law enforcement kuqalwe kabusha kutrainwe kabusha nje into ye law enforcement maybe kungaphela into ye corruption because they are all corrupt. That is why we reporting ama cases even GBV bona bashintshe bakhokhise like abaseshi bayakhokhisa bayagwazisa then ama case angakwazi ukuqhubeka aye phambili kutholakala ijustice. So mabe ngase bonke bashintshe kuqalwe phansi kutrainwe kabusha abantu abasha bangabikho laba bakhona if it's possible angazi. Siyabonga.
Ngiyabonga Siswam. It's a little bit longer than what was written on the page, but I appreciate it. So really, leaders, today was the beginning of what I think has been a very powerful engagement, but one that doesn't end here. We believe as RISE Mzansi that the work of rebuilding our country has to be done every single day. We are not going around saying to people, vote for us today so we can start working in 2024. That's not how democracy works. We believe that democracy is a team sport. So that means we have a role to play, civil society has a role to play, citizens have a role to play, business has a role to play, and we all have a role to play in holding the existing government accountable. And all that work, the work of achieving change, must be done every single day. And I applaud those of you who are already in that space and who are already doing that work every day. But for us to make the type of impact that we want to make, we have to be working together. And we have to consolidate our efforts and make sure that we are not working in silos. As I sit here and I listened to all the inputs today, it sounded to me like we actually all want the same thing. We understand the issues around policing. We understand the issues around resourcing. We understand the difficulties with reporting and the training that has to be done there. We understand the social issues, the need to support men as they also, rethink their role in society and how they can be positive contributors to this conversation. We understand that there's, and I think Ubaba said it's causation. These issues don't come from nowhere. They are connected with each other. So there's the economics of these problems. We have to fix the economy. People need to work. People need to be able to earn a living, define themselves, feel valuable, feel valued in society. People need to also trust the system, because so many of us have just lost trust in the system. People don't vote because they don't trust that their vote means anything. People don't report crimes, they don't report gender-based violence because they don't believe it will go anywhere or that anyone will do anything about it. And we can't accept that. So my call to you, or my request to you today, is beyond what you've written on this page. And I think this is important because this will inform our processes and how we are able to articulate some of these ideas into actual policy. But what I am pushing back to this room is to say, I want us to think about the next 6 weeks. What's the date today? The 31st of August. In 6 weeks, it'll be the middle of October. No? October. Yeah, September before. Yeah, so mid-October. I want you to just apply your mind and say, if there was one thing you could do to help to start to solve this problem, Eskulmangayo, in this room, EGBV, crime, whatever you think is a priority issue. If there is one thing you can do that you can execute in the next 6 weeks, not by yourself, but with the other people in this room, what would that be? What can we do now to change our reality? Yes, we must do all the other things, but what can we in this room do in the next 6 weeks? And I want us to, as we eat lunch and have drinks and stuff after this, connect with some of the other people in this room. And let's have those conversations amongst each other. How can we support each other? How can we work together? And what can we do in the next 6 weeks? Thank you so much, Nonkululeko. This has been fantastic. And thank you to our keynote speaker. Oh, she's left. Oh, okay. Thank you to our speaker for not only giving us an amazing presentation, but also dealing with some of these questions that I think many of us grapple with. It doesn't end today, as we've said. We hope that we will be able to engage with you. We hope we can reconvene again in 6 weeks to find out what you've done. Siyabonga.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to yourselves. Why are you clapping softly when you have to clap for yourselves, guys? You should be the loudest, because you do incredible work, and siyanibona and siyabonga. Once again, thank you for making time to come through today. My name is Nonkululeko Hlongwane Mhlongo, the provincial convener in KZN for RISE Mzansi. Travel safely and enjoy the rest of your day. There is lunch and drinks at the end. Please don't rush off too quickly, but if you do have to, due to emergencies and other work, we do understand, but please stay around and mingle. Ngiyabonga kakhulu for the people who are online as well. Nibe nosuku oluhle. Kukhanye futhi kwande.
Let's go.